The Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Read and written by Rebecca Sewell. Chapter 13. The knacker at sunset found Maebe sighing as she plopped to the floor of their shelter for the night. It wasn't quite a cave, but a small ricochet scar from one of the larger blasts which shaped the mountainscape with half-moon cleavings. At some point, in centuries past, a boulder had fallen to partially cover it and then grown a head of viney hair. It gave them some semblance of protection and was too narrow for a jumbo to get inside. A jagged stone jabbed into Maebe's thigh, and she groaned and came up onto all fours, clearing the ground of as many roots and rocks as she could find. Mouse produced a light crystal from his pack, a soft hue of yellow light glowing like a lonely star. What was an archaeoforest jumbo doing in the foothills of the blasted mountains? Maebe asked, rummaging through Mouse's pack for his water canteen to wash her clotted hands clean. I don't know, but it's as good a reason enough to storm the Artificer Guild without invitation tomorrow. I can scold old Ahalor for letting forbidden beasts run around in the outskirts of his city, Mouse replied, leaning against a rock by the entrance. So that's why you aren't worried about what impression you're going to make with the guild? She grinned up at him and cut the cleanest section of her greying shirt into a strip to tie over her palm. Won't Edicta come look for us? Maebe said without hope. She doubted the aged warrior would know where to look for them. This here. He waved a green crystal tied around his wrist. Will flash if I'm in trouble, and glow if I'm dead. He has one too, so he knows I'm fine. This isn't trouble enough? She asked, incredulous. I'm not injured, he smiled. You, on the other hand, how are your hands? Maebe lifted up her partially bandaged palms, neatly wrapped, but she was struggling to tie them tight. Mouse took her hands into his and gently tugged on the fabric to make sure it was spread comfortably on both sides before knotting the ends. He lingered with Maebe's cold fingers in his grip for a second before standing up. In a flourish of royal blue, he whipped his jacket from around his shoulders and spread it on the floor. Use your cloak for warmth. I don't think a fire is a good idea tonight. The jumbo might not fit in here, but that doesn't mean I want to lure it over. I'll sit here and have a kip, Mouse offered. He turned back to lean against the shrub-covered boulder at the entrance. I'm not going to leave you cold in the middle of the night without even a jacket. We can discuss our desired sleeping arrangements in depth when we aren't stranding on a mountain. Maebe knew she should have stopped speaking. Foolish words had a way of erupting from her mouth before the prudent part of her brain could intervene. Mouse's sad eyes flickered, but remained silent. She had mentioned what they had both been successfully ignoring since the boat ride across the gulf. From a pocket, she produced a small warming crystal, which she placed in the centre of the jacket, and spread her ruined green cloak over the top. The gold embroidery of vines and leaves across the border had faded with dirt, fleeing through the forest. Parts still shone from the crystal light. She also found the crushed remains of the flitter she crammed into her pocket during the boar chase, still twitching to fly. Crawling into the makeshift bed, Maebe curled around one side of the warming crystal. She held the light crystal up, willing the cave into darkness. Night had fully engulfed them before she heard Mouse sigh. The ground crunched as he took a step towards her where she lay. A draught crept through the warm cloak as he raised it and climbed under. She could tell from his breathing that he was facing her. Would it be so bad? He whispered across the narrow gap between them. No, she whispered back. The rest she left unsaid. Not at first, when it's just you and me, with no expectations. She awoke the next morning, with Mouse's arms wrapped around her. It had grown chilly after the crystal's power had faded, but in the soft dawnlight, Mouse's body was radiating desirable warmth. His breath brushed against her neck, stirring the loose hairs that escaped from her braid. The light glinted off the morning dew, and the pale colours of the sky created a perfect moment. Maebe had rejected Mouse, publicly. A few months prior, the king had announced at a gathering that he would be delighted to approve the wedding of his natural son and the Sumine daughter. It was a huge announcement because the Sumine lacked titles, to prevent them marrying into nobility and pursuing lives away from Red Seal duties. Mouse locked his eyes onto the table, fixed with a mortified expression, and sat in silence. Maebe had stood, and left everybody horrified. I am greatly honoured, my king, that you would favour such a union, but I'm afraid to announce I have no interest in your son at this moment. I have many things I wish to do before I agree to a marriage, and one of those things is to find a partner with who I've at least discussed the prospect of matrimony with. As she sat down, she noticed a crimson-faced Mouse dashing from the room. She had followed him back to his chamber, and found him packing to return to Ardell Tower. That was when they had argued. It had taken months of well-timed visits to soothe the nerves, and convince him that she hadn't meant to insult him. The last thing she wanted was to push him away. If the king hadn't forced him into a corner, they would have grown closer, she thought. It wouldn't be so bad to feel like this every day. To have Mouse become her partner, being pushed into marrying him, terrified her. She shifted closer, wanting to steal some more warmth and savour a secret embrace whilst he slept. Heat pressed against her back, lower and warmer, against her buttocks. Too much. "Curse balls, Mouse!" She threw the cloak off, stomping away from him. He sleepily dragged it back over himself. "Sorry, I am a cuddler," he murmured into the tail of the cloak he held. She yanked the makeshift blanket away from him and thoroughly shook it before fastening it over her shoulders. "That's not the problem, and you know it," she huffed. "Oh?" Realization hit him as he rolled over. "Oh!" A deep, sleepy laugh. "That's nature, May. Maybe you read about it in one of your books. I can't help it." "Well, you don't need to sound so pleased about it," she blazed. "I don't need to be ashamed of it either," he chuckled, sitting up. They left their camp within a few minutes, following the direction of the sun towards a valley that had become clear with full light. Mont River was shining as bright as a flame in the morning light, and they followed it to the coast so that they could turn north before arriving back at Clest. Before the sun was halfway to noon, the smell of food stopped them in their tracks. Someone was cooking nearby, and they were both hungry enough to investigate. The light scent of greasy smoke was enough for them to make a quick detour and chase their noses through the tangled woods. They trekked to the lip of a cliff that looked down into a large camp tucked away in a basin. Both of them exchanged confused glances at why anybody would be camped at the border of Clest, with nothing but mountains surrounding them. Maebe pointed to a flag raised above one of the tents, a constellation of stars adorned with black fabric, but she couldn't name it. She felt cold at the sight, because even though the Night Guild was located in the Three Spires of the Northern Lands, she had studied the Night Witches, and knew many of the different factions within them, and their flags. All the factions of the Night Guild were marked by constellations of their trade. The swan, for the sky map makers, who had originally made the ornate globe etched with the constellations that sat in her father's office, a rare piece to import into the Green Kingdom. The archer, for the omen tellers, who dictated fortunes and futures based on people's lunar births. The oak, for potion makers, who sold potions that offset negative effects of any star alignment that might affect a person. "Night Guild," she whispered to Mouse. "I guess they're hiding in the mountains because they didn't get approval to cross the wall with the others." As she spoke, Mouse forced her back from the edge and down onto her stomach, an action that panicked her, but she couldn't say why. "What?" she mouthed. He pointed slowly into the camp, to a fire burning in a small clearing between tents to the left of the side. A huge gathering of witches were standing before a bulky male, listening intently. Maebe squinted, focusing on the speaker. A hulking brute, dark-haired. Black eyes, not like the chosen ones in the main, but black as if they had been scooped out and replaced with balls of coal. These weren't witches. They were warlocks. If Mouse and Maebe were caught, their lives would be drained and given over as power to the warlocks, their corpses set alight, like the human bodies Maebe now realized were burning on the fires all around the camp. The Crystal Charter.